All right, today is Friday, September the 28th, the year 2018, and I've just received my first phone call, although I think he spoke to my wife earlier this week, from a man by the name of Ron Glick. I believe you're in Montana, sir, and we don't know each other, but you have a story to tell, and I think you've somehow been alerted that we advocate for the unjustly incarcerated, and so I'm here just to learn about your story, and this kind of a cold interview, right? We have very few words before I turned on the recorder. And if you don't mind, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe what you would like the audience to know about you, and what it is that you would like for the audience to know, and maybe how people can help?
Sure. My name is Ron Glick. I presently am 49 years old. Back in 2003, I was running a youth recreations program, which I'd run for about 7 years. We promoted alternative activities in the community to keep kids off the street. In the course of my time running the youth recreations program, I became aware of police officers who were sexually and physically assaulting teenagers in the community. And I was trying to gather the community, the kids together to actually make statements against the police officers. It drew some very negative attention from the city of Kalispell, who began to harass my site, who harassed my customers, to harass their families. They were spreading malicious information about me that wasn't true. Everything from I'm taking kids down to the bar to get them drunk to I'm molesting kids in the back room of my shop. Well, none of the stories actually gave me true.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Ron. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that one part that you said earlier, and I appreciate you, sharing your story with us today. But so you said that you were running what was it again? A youth
recreations program.
A youth recreations program, and there were young kids. Were they mainly? Was it for boys and girls?
Boys and girls, yeah.
Boys and girls. And some of these boys and girls were coming up to you and reporting that the policemen in Kalispell, Montana, were sexually abusing the kids. Is that? Do I have that right?
Actually, I witnessed the police officers coming. My star was downtown, and we had what they call the Third and Main group of kids, where 3rd Street and Main Street, they used to hang out at night. And the police would come down there and harass them. And I've seen everything from the police hitting the kids to pushing them down to threatening them. On one specific occasion, I saw a police officer come up, and this girl, she was probably 13, 14 years old. I never saw her again on the crew after that. He came up to her and literally asked her if she wanted a date. And she said, "F off, perv." And he grabbed her by the back of the neck, threw her in the back of the car, and drove off with her. Her friends later told me that he had taken her to the edge of town, forced her to give him oral sex, and then took her home and threatened that if she ever said anything, he would basically, put her in a ditch somewhere. I mean, it was just horrific. And she was so terrified she never came back to the Third Main group again that I ever saw. I mean, these are things I personally witnessed.
Did you know some of the names of these officers? I mean, did you?
It's been too many years, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, one problem with, and I'm sure any of your incarcerated individuals can tell you, incarceration has a stagnation effect upon the memory. Literally, your mind goes stagnant after a while, and you're just basically trying to just get up, go through your day, go to sleep. Get up, go through your day, go to sleep. A lot of my memories of names, and I was never good at remembering names to begin with, but there at the time I had 3 different officers I had names of. I had, I could have told you then.
Okay.
It's been 14 years.
Well,
and I just don't recall the names now.
And again, not that it matters, because child molestation by police officers of any race, color, creed is incredibly horrible. But I just have to ask, just to get the dynamics in my head, are these mainly Caucasian boys and girls with Caucasian police officers, or are there? I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Every one of the officers were Caucasian. There was no Hispanics or black. I don't know if there's any Hispanics or blacks or anyone like that on our police force. I honestly believe that it's very much a white Caucasian police force.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to get a picture of the dynamics and context of the situation. Okay, very good. So you become aware you're running the youth recreation program, and the police officers you're witnessing some of this abhorrent sexual misconduct from the police officers in Kalispell, Montana, and then you start to do what? You start to tell the newspaper. You start to go to the what do you do?
What I was trying to do was trying to get the kids to get together to make statements against the police.
Okay.
At the time, I was very naive. I had the perception that, if they vocalized their threats, if they put the threats in writing, the higher ups could not possibly be aware of this going on. They would step in. There would be consequences, and these police officers would stop harassing these kids. I felt I needed their statements.
Yeah.
So I was trying to get them to make statements. I remember one time I went down to the police department, just as another example. I went down to the police department to stand with a kid who was making a statement, and watched a girl come in, and she had a twin sister, and she had a fight with her twin sister, and the twin sister, she tore out her nose ring or something, and she ended up going to the hospital. She came into the police department while I was sitting there with another kid, trying to have him make a statement, and she was telling the police officer, "I'm afraid to go home because my mom has said she'll kill me." And the police officer was sitting right there and saying, "You need to go home because if you were my kid, I'd beat you. You have absolutely no rights. You deserve to get beaten. You deserve to get whatever's coming to you." I mean, by the laws of the state of Montana, anytime a child reports a threat of harm, they're required immediately to contact Child and Family Services. So this officer was telling this young girl to go home and get beat. And it's just, that's the kind of stuff I've witnessed. But as I was trying to get them to make their statements, obviously it attracted the attention of the police officers in the community, and I started getting harassments at my shop for a random program. And it started out with a police officer coming in and with hand on holster, literally hand on holster, asking for me by name. I had visits from the health department claiming I was making food and preparing food on the premises and selling it, which I wasn't. I had visits from the fire marshal who were trying to come up with the most ridiculous reasons to shut my business down. Just over and over, these harassments kept persisting. And in the course of this time, I was dating a girl, and she had two daughters. One was 13, and the other was like 4 or 5, I think, at the time. Maybe 6, 5, I think she was at the time. And they basically came in. She had made how to put this? She had gone to her grandparents, and her grandparents had wanted my girlfriend to date a judge, and were trying to break our relationship up. And they talked the eldest daughter into making an allegation against me that I was supposedly touched her one time inappropriately. It was a completely false story, but it was all about getting her dad back in her life, because they convinced her that she said this about me and got me to break up with Mara, that they could get her mom and her dad back together. The story fell apart very quickly. It just within days, it literally fell apart. She went to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said she had no emotional attachment to the story. Her story's details changed. She was using words she didn't understand. It was very obvious she'd been coached, and the story fell apart very quickly. And of course, afterwards, she was remorseful and she was sorry, and the reasons came out, and we thought there was a big disruption in our life, and we thought it was going to move forward. Well, they latched onto this. They after she had recanted her story, after she admitted it didn't happen, the police were still harassing my business, still trying to force my business to shut down. And I was forced to file a lawsuit.
Mr. Glick, when you say your business, you're talking about the youth recreation program, or is there another business?
Youth recreations program.
Okay.
I should clarify that. We had a youth recreations program, but in order to create a permanent site for it, we opened up a business that we could host it out of. So we owned a business called Arcadia, and the youth recreations program was called the Outpost CCG. Okay. But we just needed a permanent site for it, because we started it out by moving between different sites and trying to offer in different stores, and it was just too hectic. So we decided to set up a permanent location, and since we couldn't seem to raise money through grants for it, we opened up a for-profit business to try to have a home for it. Okay. So I'm constantly referring to the shop. That's what I'm referring to.
Got it.
Like I said, the harassments got to the point that I couldn't function. I literally had police officers showing up at my door or at the business. I had officials coming in trying to shut me down. So I filed a lawsuit against the city of Kalispell. The next day, they came and they abducted my stepdaughters out of school. They took. It was without any reason, any justification, any hearing or investigation. Just came and took them. And they held them in isolation for 3 weeks, terrorized them until they could get the eldest to reassert her allegation with changed details to try to reassert the allegation, and tried to use that as leverage to get me to dismiss the lawsuit. I wouldn't dismiss the lawsuit. They never filed a response to it because they thought I would, and I filed for default judgment. The courts just immediately came after me again, and the next thing I knew, by February 20th, 2004, and I filed this lawsuit in November 2003. This whole thing started in July of 2003. By November, everything was shut down. All the investigations were done. Everything. I filed a lawsuit in November. The next day, they came and took my stepdaughters. And then in February, after I filed for default judgment on the lawsuit, they turned around and issued a warrant for me at 4:30 in the morning without a judge's signature, without any kind of legal process. And even the warrant itself was not filed with the court until 4 days after I was arrested. It was basically a threat against me. I got arrested under it. Once I got arrested, they had to proceed with a prosecution. And I spent 16 months in jail without a probable cause hearing, without a trial, without anything, while they terrorized and threatened everyone on the outside. They wouldn't release me. They refused to release me, in spite of the fact I had no criminal history, no criminal anything. My own lawyer got up in front of the judge and said, "Your Honor, I cannot ask you to grant a release of this person with a straight face." I mean, my own lawyer said this.
This is the one. This is your public pretender that was assigned by the state.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
Right. Yeah.
Public pretender is exactly it.
Okay. So he didn't even ask that you be released. I mean, it's that's the guy that's supposed to be advocating for you. Okay.
He asked, but he said it in the context of, he says, "Your Honor, I can't ask you to release him with a straight face,
oh,
but
wow.
he's my client, and therefore here I am."
Okay, I, mean, I got you. So let me ask this: the girlfriend, right? I think you mentioned her name is Mara, and her 2 children. Were they supportive of you during this time? Were they like, "Hey, you know, he didn't do that. He didn't."
Initially, they.
Yep.
Initially, they were during the initial investigation and everything. During the time I was out. A week after they arrested me, they arrested Mara under Trump charges. So they basically immediately put a threat on her and said, "You know, if you continue to support Ron, you're going to go to jail yourself." She folded like a house of wet cards.
Gotcha.
She just immediately buckled under and started complying with everything they said. Cut me off from my business assets, cut me off from my income, cut me off from everything. Just took everything. I suddenly went from a successful business owner trying to create other state divisions of my business into absolutely poverty levels, absolutely nothing. Because they terrorized her and told us she supported me directly or indirectly, that she would be back in jail. And they tried to tell her that supporting me was considered tampering with a witness, and therefore she couldn't offer me any support, even financial. I mean, it was just the way they terrorized her. Eventually, she buckled under and just started doing whatever they told her to do. All because they had taken her daughters. She was convinced the only way to get her daughters back was to cooperate. And they kept the threat over her head until 4 days before I actually did see a trial, which was 16 months later. My efforts to try to, my own attorney, they manufactured a witness against me while I was in jail, who was my client's attorney. Two witnesses, actually, one of which testified against me, one of which didn't, both of which were my client's attorneys, both of which gained access to information in my case that they could not have gained from anyone else. They were manufactured. The first witness who came forward didn't testify, but the second did, and he was dead 10 days after my trial.
How did he die?
Supposedly a drug overdose.
Okay. But
they ruled it as a suicide, but it was just very shaky conditions. It was just so nobody dared question it. It was one of those. Well, we came home and found him dead in the front room with an overdose of pills.
You said okay.
No letter.
Okay, no letter. So these were 2 gentlemen who testified in your behalf on your character, and I mean, is that
no? These are individuals the state manufactured who claimed I confessed to the crime while in jail.
Oh, I see. These were jailhouse confession things. Okay, yeah, jailhouse informants.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very common. I see that all the time where, they'll send somebody to death row because supposedly the guy confessed when he was in jail. And, okay, yeah, that's a very common tactic of the prosecutors, right?
Yeah, and they were fed information about my case they couldn't have known. I mean, the details, they got a lot of details just dead wrong, but there were details that they couldn't have known because they were just simply not information that was public. Yet they knew information about my case. And my attorney knew it, and they were conveniently both my attorney's clients.
Okay.
So they couldn't convict me because I'm trying not to say her name because I've been busted for saying her name. They've actually banned me from saying her name. I actually have an order of restriction saying I cannot even say her name.
This is the victim? The victim?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very common. That's a very common procedure by the courts that you cannot say their name. I understand. Yeah, okay.
But actually, it's not as, I mean, if they're a minor, they can't be named in court documents. But freedom of speech is supposed to prohibit. I mean, I can supposedly say whoever I want to say, whatever I want to say about somebody else. She's an adult. She's been an adult for a long time now. There's no reason not to. They just don't want her being pressured to come forward.
Well, let me ask you this. You don't mind me saying your name, right? Ron Glick?
Nope.
And it's
not at all.
Glické?
No, Glick.
Glick. Okay, so if I was to go look on the internet for Ron Glick trial, or I know it's you're claiming this is false charges, but Ron Glick child molestation, would I find news articles and reports about this event on the internet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I could probably learn more about the situation doing that. And plus, you've written a book. I wanted to let you mention that, but go ahead with your story. But I want everybody to know that you've written a book that you want people to read, and so that's very important as well.
Well, while we're referencing it, I did write a book. It's called U.S. Political Prisoners Since 2004, the true story of an innocent man held as a political dissident in Kalispell, Montana. I also written a blog called The Great Montana Conspiracy. It's monspiracy.wordpress.com. So my information's there as well. I've been targeted horrendously for what I've written. I mean, I'm constantly getting attacked for it. So I've written a lot, less and less and less, because quite frankly, the more I write, even if it's true, it tends to I just get attacked for it. And I say attacked as in the government officials do, not people in general. Just the government officials come after me. I just survived a 2.5 or an almost 2-year process of revocation because I published the book. The prosecutor was named in it, and he didn't like that. So
okay.
Came out.
How many pages is the book? Just curious. How many pages is the book?
Oh gosh, I don't know off the top of my head.
It's several hundred though, right? It's a pretty big book. It's a pretty lengthy. Okay.
Yeah, it's several hundred plus. There's a lot of pages scanned in the back, which are scanned records.
Okay.
Of the case. So there's a lot of it that's actually my text, and then there's also about probably a third of it is scanned documentation in the back. That I'm trying to be as transparent as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Now, anyway, so I spent all this time in jail.
Well, I'm sorry, Ron. I keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry, but you had me up to 16 months. They took you to trial, and then what happened at the trial? I mean, you were 16 months held in trial. They wouldn't let you released on bail, and then what happened at the trial? And did you spend? Yep.
The trial was a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. I mean, I literally had my own. They brought in a second attorney to question my my other attorney's client. His details. The details were just dead wrong. And every time I tried to point out the details were wrong, they wouldn't point it out. The court wouldn't let us review his records so we could find out if he had done this in the past. It was a sham. I mean, the problem is my own attorney. I mean, the whole point that I was trying to make in the course of the prosecution was that this was retaliatory. I had filed a lawsuit against Kalispell. Immediately after filing a lawsuit, they came and they abducted my stepdaughters. They pressured them. They terrorized them. It took 3 weeks in custody before the eldest reasserted her allegation. I mean, it's just unheard of to do this kind of stuff, and they did it. And I wanted to bring that out. And my own attorney got up in front of the court and tried to make it this wild, paranoid-sounding conspiracy theory that wasn't even. He didn't use any of the facts. He just kind of made this really wild claim that just had no foundation. His entire defense was based upon, it did happen, but my client was asleep. And I told him, I said, no, this detail said, I just said her name, I wasn't supposed to say her name. Is there any way to strike?
Yeah. It's about the 19-minute mark, so I can cut that out, no problem.
Okay, good, thank you. But basically, she got on the stand, and they had changed the details yet again for the trial. She got on the stand, and they threatened her on the stand because her story didn't comply with their new version of events. They literally threatened. She started answering her questions. They tried to say that I had patted the couch and tried to get her to come back to the couch in the story, and she had not been told this version of events apparently, because she said, "No, he didn't do that. Are you sure he didn't?" I just said it again. Please strike that.
Okay.
He said, "Where are you living right now?" Well, I'm in foster care. And you want to go home, don't you? And she just immediately stopped and got tearful. It was an obvious threat.
How old was she? How old was she when she was testifying?
She would have been 15, I think.
Okay, and how old would she have been at the time? The time the alleged molestation occurred?
Depending upon which version of the story, 12 or 13.
Okay.
She told different versions to different people.
Okay.
And the time frame wasn't always the same.
And you said she's an adult now, so she's over 18, over 21, or?
Yes.
Okay. So what year? What year did the alleged molestation occur?
2003.
Oh, 2003. Okay, so that would have been 12 or 13. It's 2018, so she's probably 28, 30 years old by now.
Yes.
Okay, so does she still maintain her story? She's obviously probably read your book. She knows that you're fighting for your freedom, fighting for your integrity, your reputation. Does she have any contact with you at all, or she just maintained her?
I'm not able to contact her.
I see.
Forbidden from doing so.
I see.
In fact, I've been told that if she does try to reach out, I have to basically hang up the phone immediately. I cannot accept any communication from her, even if she wanted to come forward and tell the truth.
I see.
However, I am told, keep in mind, she found out very quickly that she could get special treatment if she acted like the victim.
Yeah.
If she, I don't want to take a test in school, I'm upset over this. I don't want to go to school at all. I'm upset over this. She literally lived off the victim status, and she found out very quickly she could get special attention and special treatment by playing up the role of the victim. And
well, and let me just quickly interject this here too, because we're talking for the first time, and there's people that are going to be listening to you. They're going to be listening to, the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. And you know already that I consider myself, and I identify as a Bible-believing follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the Bible is my rule book. I look to the Bible for how I live my life. Now, I think when you spoke to my wife, it's not to say that Christians won't stand up for non-Christians, but you do not identify as a Christian. I just want to, just for the sake of clarity, not that that's any relevance on this matter, because if anybody, the parable of the Good Samaritan in the Bible, if anybody is suffering an injustice, a Christian is obligated to do what's right and to stand up and to listen to all the facts and to try to make a determination what's really going on. But is that true that you do not identify as a Christian? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Yeah, that is correct. Quite frankly, I have many Christian friends who say I live my life more Christian than most Christians. I live my life through charity. Even today, I spend all of my time helping people. I do everything I can to be of service to people. I try to I ran a youth recreations program for 7 years. I got out of prison. The first thing I did was I set up a nonprofit adult sobriety program, and I ran it for like 5 years. My entire life is about helping and being charitable to people. I got you.
And just
hold of the creeds of Christian.
No, I understand. And just to share with you my personal, and I don't want to go, too deep into the religious faith discussion, because I know this is an opportunity for you to get your story out. But my personal belief is that it's not of the works that identifies someone as a Christian. It's whether, it's your belief on the identity of Jesus Christ, that I believe Jesus Christ died for my sins and He is my Savior. But having said that, the other thing I wanted to share, and just for the sake of the audience members listening, is would you agree like me? For instance, there are other prisoners that I advocate for that have been charged with heinous acts of child molestation. And I often say, and sometimes I even interview their own mothers, and I will say, if they're guilty, right, if these men are actually guilty of the crimes they've been charged with, then I would help bury them under the prison rather than advocate for their freedom. But many times, because I've found out
maybe not that far, but absolutely, there are definitely people out here who deserve to be punished. For molesting children. There are horrendous people out here who commit heinous acts.
Yes.
There was I want to say Timothy Duncan, I think it was his name, who the same year I was going through all this, he kidnapped a brother and sister, murdered the brother, molested the sister out in the wilderness of Montana. Horrific story. Just makes me sick to my stomach at the thought of it.
Gotcha. And and I just wanted to say, during the course of your story, you're not trying to diminish or the act of child molestation. Matter of fact, it goes on rampantly in the pedophilia in the Catholic Church, from what I'm told and from all the information I can gather. But you're not trying to diminish the act. You're just saying you're not guilty of the act, but that if someone is guilty of the act, they do deserve a harsh punishment for that activity.
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm going to bury them.
Well, okay. Well, then I would, but I understand we may have differences of opinion. That's okay. That's okay. But at the same time,
these are sick and sadistic people. These are people who have abuse control problems, who look for victims. They are predators. They are. There are some really horrific offenders out there who absolutely deserve to be punished. No one should ever take advantage of a person, a child or an adult, anything. I mean, I cannot. I advocated for children for 7 years against abuse.
Yep.
And the problem was, and I fell into the same trap, is I believe that if a child made a claim, they don't lie. I believe that. I ran advocacy for children for 7 years on that principle until I found out that that's not true.
Yeah.
Because I became a victim of that.
Got it.
I mean, absolutely. I could not be more appalled by the idea or the concept of somebody taking advantage of somebody.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think we're in violent agreement on that issue, but I'm also appalled that somebody would be innocently convicted of a charge, and because of our criminal justice system being so horrific that innocent men, suffer the consequences of such actions, and I think that our criminal justice system is so wicked that happens quite often. But having said that, you were telling me about how it was a kangaroo court, you didn't get a fair trial, they probably withheld exculpatory evidence. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what happens that you were held 16 months, you had the kangaroo trial, and then maybe pick up the story from that point.
Yeah, and then basically I spent a few months, I spent a total of 22 months in the county jail between my conviction and the actual sentencing. And at the sentencing, they actually came out and said that because they believe, and even though it's unconstitutional, I can tell you a dozen cases that say it's unconstitutional, that I was given a harsh sentence, a 20-year sentence with 15 years suspended, 15 years suspended, because I would not confess, because I would not show remorse for the alleged act.
Mm-hmm.
It was and then that brings in the whole other issue. Under the law, a suspended sentence is a sentence that is not served at the time it's imposed, versus a probation sentence where you serve community supervision in lieu of custody. I was given a 15-year suspended sentence, but immediately upon release from prison, I was put into a probationary custody. I was not sentenced to it. It was not until years later, when they came back and revised my conditions, that they actually made it to where I was actually subject to probation and parole. I mean, I spent 5 years in prison. I was eligible, ironically enough, I would have been eligible for parole at 14 months of the 5-year sentence, but I was 16 months before I even saw trial. It should have been immediately released to parole, but they insisted I go to prison and complete a sexual offender course. So I did. I complied with it. I went to their class. And then I went before the parole board, and they also refused to release me because I refused to confess to a crime I didn't commit. They said I did not show remorse.
I got to just quickly interject, Ron. I often see prisoners who have maintained their innocence for 10, 15, 20. I've got a couple of prisoners for 35 years. They do not show any remorse because in their hearts they believe they're innocent, and I believe they're innocent too. And the parole board commission simply will not release them because they don't show remorse. But if you're innocent, you're going against your conscience when you show a fake remorse. Yep.
I heard so many people tell me, well, why don't you just say what they want you to say and they'll leave you alone? I say, because I have to look myself in the mirror every morning and know I'm living a lie. Yeah. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't in my own conscience lie and say I did something just to get, Benjamin Franklin said, and I'm going to get the quote all mixed up, I'm sure, but he said that anyone who gives up a little freedom for a little liberty deserves neither.
Yeah. Well, we've got Charles Dyer, who's another prisoner that we advocate for, a Marine veteran, and he's been told the same thing many times. If you'll just confess, if you'll just say that you did it, you probably will get out of prison. But he refuses to do so because he's maintaining his innocence, and I believe him. But anyway, I completely understand that whole dynamic of the pressure to just confess and you'll get out sooner. But I don't think that's the right. I think it's another wicked attribute of our criminal justice system and prison system.
They want basically, and the problem, and I recognize it's a huge, horrific problem, as we spoke just briefly before the recording started about aggressive and prosecutors who just go out and are just trying to basically fill their jacket with prosecutions and convictions.
Right.
In my case, this wasn't that. This was everyone who's attached to this case knows this didn't happen. This was to stop a lawsuit and to silence me. That's what it has always been about. This has never been about them believing a crime was committed. An investigation was conducted. I was relieved of the original allegation. They knew it didn't happen. The alleged victim could not maintain a straight story. She even recanted her accusation. And there was absolutely nothing to go on except that I sued these people for what they had done to me, and they decided to retaliate.
Well, let me ask you.
Retaliating ever since.
Let me ask you this, Ron. So you're saying you don't think it's an ambitious prosecutor who's just trying to chalk up another conviction so he can, win district attorney election or something like that. You're actually thinking that it's to silence you and to stop a lawsuit. So I have to ask you, the complaints that you originally heard from these kids when you were running the youth recreational program, do you think that they were making stuff up, or do you think there was some validity? You said you witnessed it. You said you actually saw.
I witnessed it.
Okay, got it. Okay, so you think there was some real? Yeah. Okay, I got it. So you think there's some real credible evidence that the police in Kalispell, Montana, were sexually abusing these children, and that they're trying to silence you. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And like I said, the chief of police, Frank Garner, has gone on to. He was wrapped up in a. I won't go into that too much, but he was wrapped up in a prostitution ring. He was protecting and sheltering somebody running a prostitution ring in Kalispell. And he left office for 10 years, but now that he's outside the range of prosecution against those offenses, now he's back in office. He's now a state representative. These people have gone on with their careers. They've gone on and pursued their gainful employment as law enforcement, as politicians, and meanwhile, my life is obliterated. And they basically walk around and they've got the clout, they've got the positions of authority, they've got respect, and I've got nothing because people automatically assume that these people must be telling the truth.
Well, the
positions of authority.
From my perspective, the Bible says there will come a time when they call evil good and good evil. Can you share it with some of you? You were talking to me before we started the recorder about some of the restrictions on your life, that you're not necessarily behind bars. You're not in a jail cell, but you said you can't leave Montana, and there's some other. You can't have relationships because anybody that you might get in a relationship with might have kids, and they're prohibiting you from being around children.
Yeah, it's so extreme that I literally cannot have a relationship with anyone who has children or anyone whose children are grown and might have grandchildren. I mean, the prospect, even hypothetically under this scheme, if I were to date somebody and she were to get pregnant, I would immediately not be able to date that person because she has a child. That's how strict my conditions are. I even, on a personal level, because I felt so morally troubled by this, I actually voluntarily went out and got a vasectomy because I was afraid that I would date somebody and then get her pregnant and have all these emotions tied up and lose them because they had a child.
Okay,
me.
I got you.
I mean, it was just, I regretted the choice, honestly, but at the time I couldn't find anybody who wanted to date me, knowing the prospect of they wanted families, they wanted to move forward. If I could find someone who didn't already have children, and then they wanted to have families, and if I had a family with them, I could not make any plans for a future with them.
Wow.
So I felt the only choice I had, rather than put a child through that, to put another person through that, was to make sure that I could not put them in that position.
Incredible.
It's just...
How long did you... How long... I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ron. Finish your thought, but I did have a question about how long you spent in prison.
I spent in prison 5 years. I spent the full 5 years because the parole board would not release me.
Wow.
They had no choice at the end of 5 years but to release me, but immediately I was come out. Within a month, they were trying to put me back in prison. Facing a revocation effort. Within a month of being out, they were trying to put me back in prison. Do you feel in danger?
Do you feel in danger of being put back in prison even today, even for making this video?
Oh, yes. Okay. Every time I hear a knock on the door or I hear activity in the hallway, my anxiety level goes up. I am fearful of any time I see a police officer driving by. Every time I see anybody, because I know that literally without any warning, they can come and put me back in jail, and they have. It's not based. The fear is there. I'm trauma. I suffer with trauma. I do.
Yeah. Even if you were to obtain a job in another state, they simply won't allow you to leave Montana. Is that how it works?
The problem is they don't want me. They know that if I am in another state, and that's why I'm saying this isn't about a vexatious prosecution or even an aggressive prosecutor trying to build their political career. They are deliberately doing what they're doing to silence me. If they know if I'm under another state, they can't do it. They can't. It can't threaten me with going back to jail for publishing my story.
Yeah.
They can't put me in jail for making a political statement against one of these people who's running for office. They can't do those kind of retaliatory measures. So they might allow me to go through the process, but they'll sabotage it.
Yeah.
Because I brought lawsuits against the city, because I brought lawsuits against the department for inhumane treatment. Like I said, as I mentioned to you before, one of the things they did early on was they barred me from physical therapy. I have a chronic joint pain disease called rheumatoid variant disease. And spending 5 years in prison without any real medical treatment, my condition got really declined. So my doctor, immediately upon getting out, prescribed aquatic therapy. Well, my probation officer refused to let me take aquatic therapy, alleging that a pool environment was where children could be, and therefore I wasn't safe to be in there. Deliberate indifference to medical care. The reason why this condition was necessary was to prevent my heart, my lungs, my kidneys from failing because of my sedentary lifestyle, because of my joint problems. Now I am in stage 3 fibrosis of the liver with cirrhosis just inches away, literally, because of that level of inactivity I was forced to maintain, and they barred me from medical care for that long of a period of time. They've kind of, in response to this, they finally have released me and allowed me to go back to take physical therapy to try to reverse the condition. So far, it has not been 6 months now into trying to reverse it. It has not changed anything. I'm still with a failing liver. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. I don't smoke. I don't do any of those kind of things. I don't do those vices. So this isn't because of, that kind of thing. What year did your
5-year prison sentence end?
2009.
So you've been out now for 9 years. Okay.
Yes, 9 years now.
Okay, but it's still very restricted limitations, I understand, but you've been out of the jail. I got to ask you this, too, and I hate to keep interrupting, but these thoughts, I'll lose them if I don't ask. And I've always heard this, right, and I believe it's true, but I would like to hear your firsthand account, because it's so valuable to hear somebody who's been through this experience. Being in prison for 5 years, I guess it was a Montana state prison, and being convicted for child molestation, did you get severe and harsher treatment not only from the guards, but from the fellow prisoners because of your conviction, or did they not find out and therefore it wasn't an issue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They made a point of letting everybody know who the sex offenders were. There was no effort to try to disguise your charges while you were inside.
Okay.
And actually, at one point, I was actually beaten severely in the shower because a guard provoked an inmate to do it.
Wow.
And in my case, I was even more so because I was a legal advocate. I was what they call a legal beagle on the inside. I would be helping everyone with their legal cases. They did what they called the regional shuffle with me. They shuffled me around to every facility in the state because I kept helping people try to challenge their legal situation. So I became a target of the guards on the inside, because even though they're not supposed to inhibit or restrict, Montana State Prison goes out of their way to make sure that inmates cannot help each other. They don't provide legal assistance or counsel for anybody. They will come into your cell and take your legal papers and your legal research just because they can. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. They just can. They don't want prisoners realizing exactly how broken this system is, how unconstitutional this system is. But okay. Yeah, I had nerve damage on the left side of my face now because I was beaten in the shower because an inmate was provoked by a guard. His name was Archuleta in the Great Falls facility here in Montana. He provoked the inmate to attack me in the shower, and I literally had the eyebrow was hanging over my left eye. I have nerve damage to this day inside of my nose and upper lip. I have a twitch in my lip that I can't get rid of. Okay. Because of it.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. It's tragic, and it's very consistent. And I wanted to hear that firsthand from you because that aligns with some of the other stories that I hear as well. When men go into prison convicted under those types of situations, that their prison time is incredibly brutal and harsh. So, yes, okay.
Yeah, there's some effort to segregate some in some of the facilities, but they don't really. There's still common ground. There's still a lot of areas that, especially in the Montana State Prison, there's a lot of areas. And they allow the inmates, they'll sit back and allow the inmates to run a tier program of aggression against each other. They don't really try to intercede in it. So just the fact, I've been under very serious threats. If I come out of my cell, I'm going to, that kind of stuff. Just because the guards provoke it. Honestly, when it comes down to it, and I'm not trying to minimize this in the least. I went in with the bare minimum sexual allegation. I supposedly touched a girl one time. Bare minimum. There are people in there who've been in there for, having sex with their children, for, multiple recidivistic behavior, who received less attention and less aggression because I would not confess. They wanted me to basically bow and scrape. I wouldn't. The guards would release information and provoke hostilities against me because I was someone who refused to acknowledge or confess to the crime. And it made me even a bigger target.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's an important distinction, because I am aware of people that are convicted of, the heinous raping, penetration sort of activities that I believe are more, and I'm not trying to, minimize anything as well, but it sounds like you weren't convicted of any sort of sexual assault with penetration. It's just simply a touching situation, which is, I say simply, but they're both bad, but there's a difference, I believe.
If it wasn't, without being a rape, with it just being an alleged touching, there was no way to disprove it through any kind of medical testing.
Yeah,
there was no way to prove I didn't touch someone.
Yeah, right.
So if it was an allegation of some kind of sexual penetration or something of that regard, there would have to be medical tests to back it up, and they knew there was nothing because it didn't happen.
Right, okay.
So if they had gone that far, they would have had to prove that something of that nature had happened to her, and obviously nothing had.
Right, I understand.
So, and that's one thing I would like to point out to your listeners. In Montana, and I know this is like this in a lot of the other states, but in Montana, the standard of law is that in order to consider something a fact, you have to have two corroborating witnesses say the same thing. You can't, one person getting up saying, I saw you going to 7-Eleven at 5 o'clock in the morning, becomes the opinion of the witness, unless somebody else says, I also saw you going to 7-Eleven at 5 o'clock in the morning. Then it becomes a fact under law, and the jury must consider it a fact. In the case of sexual assault or sexual deviancy crimes, the jury is instructed they have to take it as a fact on one testimony alone, and that is that of the victim. They must consider it a fact. They're told this going in. So they're going in from the very beginning being told you must believe this person regardless of any circumstances. This is a victim, therefore you must accept it as fact. It's an impossible ramp to prevail against.
Well, again, I go back to the case of Charles Dyer. He's in jail solely on the testimony of the victim, which I believe was coached by a mother in the middle of a vicious custody battle. So that is a terrible standard to say that the victim's word is fact and you don't have to have any other corroborating evidence whatsoever. I got to ask you too, I guess because you have been convicted of this every single year for the rest of your life, you have to register as a sex offender in the state and all your neighbors can look you up and identify you. Is that true?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. That's got to be a hard situation to live under as well.
Yeah, I mean, I literally have people, again, very minimal thing. I go onto Craigslist. I have to monitor Craigslist regularly because I have people who go on who just launch attacks against me on Craigslist. And I'm absolutely sure these are people who are attached to the government in some way, because I can't imagine just common people just getting a burr on their side and deciding they're just going to start using my name out there.
Okay, you're going to get mad at me for interrupting you so much, but I got to tell you that now that you mention that, because I advocate for so many prisoners, I see these groups of people all the time. I mean, they've got to be getting paid by some sort of government institution, because there is a team of people practically for every single prisoner that I advocate for. And what are these people getting out of it? I mean, they just spend so much time and so much energy and so much of their own personal resources to go after the individual. I can't imagine, these people would do that of their own, volition without being
kind of a vested interest.
Yes. But what you just said, the point I'm trying to make, Ron, is that the situation you're describing is not unique to you. That it goes on with lots of other people as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I think honestly, I can't believe these people are not attached in some way to government actors. Whether they're people who are trying to support the candidates or people in law enforcement or whatever, or whether they're actually people in office themselves. If you go onto my Amazon site for my book, the U.S. Political Prisoner book, there was recently, the most recent comment, and no one's posted a comment to the book ever since, somebody calling themselves J.D. Cahill, and I found out that Cahill is actually a role that John Wayne played, I guess. So it's an alias. But they actually purport to actually working inside the 11th Judicial Court of Montana, where I was convicted, and they are saying they're basically basically saying that everything I'm saying is true, that the system is the most corrupt system. It's the most widely kept secret in Montana, Supposedly, when they posted that, they said they were going to come forward with documents themselves. This person, this anonymous person, has not come forward to bring those documents to the fore I'm aware of. But there are people out here who do acknowledge that this is true. It's just we can't get people to unify because they're so individually terrified.
Yeah.
They're individually terrified of retaliation. They saw what happened to me. When I went to jail, I had hundreds of people who were backing me. They all fell away. And I got a hold of a couple of them, and universally they said, I can't afford to go to jail. I can't afford to lose my job. I can't afford.
Yeah, I hear that story over and over and over again. That people's friends, they used to have talk show radio hosts. They used to be guests on talk show radio hosts. They used to be hosts, right? And they had all these network of friends. But as soon as the state labels them a criminal, in your case, it's a very heinous charge, all of their friends all of a sudden disappear, and you find out who your true friends are. It's absolutely amazing. The other thing is you mentioned all these people working for the government, and you know, we go back in history 50, 60, 70 years, there was a very small number of people in our population that were on the government payroll. Most people were farmers, ranchers, you know, independent businessmen, small businesses. But now I believe that has flipped, and you have the majority of the population that some way, shape, or form are taking money from the government dole. And so, you know, the other name to my website, I don't know if you're aware of this, is not only yearofjubilee.com with one E, but also I hate the FBI, because I believe the FBI's primary function in this world, in our society that we live in, is to protect the establishment. And if they identify someone such as yourself that is calling out law enforcement officials or the establishment, then you become a target, and the FBI all of a sudden becomes invested in discrediting you, imprisoning you, or silencing you at whatever option they can. Now
I should make it to clarify. I've actually had no conflict with the FBI. I've had absolutely no help from the FBI.
Yeah.
But I've had no actual. The FBI themselves have not come after me. I should note, however, in saying that every single official in the state of Montana, every federal official I've been able to locate and identify, have all been raised from within Montana and Montana's legal system. There's nobody in the state of Montana that I've been able to find who has come here from another state. It is a completely segregated, isolated environment, whereas the federal government is supposed to act as a safeguard against state abuse under RICO and other various laws. The state of Montana makes sure to elevate only people who are loyal to Montana first.
Yeah.
So I don't even have the ability to go to federal authorities. Every time I try to go to federal authorities outside the state, they just refer it back to the state-placed individuals. I don't have the ability to go to federal authorities for help because they are all loyal to Montana.
And that's very interesting. I definitely think that's an interesting facts that you just shared. But just from my counsel and my experience, if you do try to reach out to the federal law enforcement officials with the FBI or even law enforcement officials of other states, I don't see it any better. I see this wickedness that you're experiencing across our entire nation, and it happening on a massive scale. But, it's not to say that I hope you prove me wrong. I hope you can find a few good nuggets inside law enforcement somewhere that will step up to the plate and look at your case and try to do what's right. So that, I pray that does indeed happen, but I'm just saying that I don't have a lot of faith in our criminal justice system.
And I've been trying to petition Senators John Tester, Gianforte, other senators and representatives. We only have one representative from Montana. We have two senators. But I've been trying to get them to actually just launch an investigation, look into this. Nobody will do it. So I'm not. There's a deliberate indifference from the federal level towards Montana. I haven't had direct conflict, is all I'm saying, personally. But I definitely recognize that they are sheltering Montana.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Well, very good. Ron, we've been going about 49 minutes, and I want to make sure you have the last word. What I do want any listeners who are listening to this to know is that you do have a book on Amazon, and if they go to Amazon.com and type in Ron Glick Prisoner, it brings up your book, U.S. Political Prisoners Since 2004. This is our first conversation, Ron, and I think you won't have any problem if I say that I'm not taking any side at this point in time, but I don't necessarily jump to conclusions just because the state has labeled you with this. I have become aware that our system is so wicked that I just don't assume everybody that's spent time in prison is guilty, because I've seen our wicked criminal justice system in work, and so I'm willing to give you a voice to tell your story. I hope that other people check out about your story. If people want to communicate with you, did you want to give out your email address, or if how is it? What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
They can definitely reach out to me through my email address. It's Ron_Glick at yahoo.com. That's RON_GLICK at yahoo.com. My information is out there. I have my phone number published publicly, my email address published publicly. Obviously, I'm out there very visible. I'm not trying to hide. My belief is that transparency and honesty is the only weapon I have, even though it's a blunt instrument right now. It's the only weapon I have. And so I'm not trying to hide. I'm not trying to, work through an agent or somebody or a lawyer who will diffuse and deflect. I'm out there. But at the same time, I also have experienced a lot of hate, a lot of threats, and I will report threats to law enforcement, obviously. Not that I get any help with that, but I do.
Yeah, well, it's on the record, right? It's you've made a record of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I want to make sure you have the last word, and as we come upon the 50-minute mark, and anything else you think it's important for the listeners to hear, but I want to share with you that in advocating for other unjustly incarcerated prisoners, some of them have decades in prison, 35 years for a couple of them, and I think I could go into horrific miscarriages of justice that, very similar to yours, and sometimes, even much worse than yours. But the journey that you're walking down, and I can't even claim to have experienced even 10% of your life experience and what you've been through, but I will say that the people that I see that get through this and maintain their sanity are those that have a strong faith in Christ. Now, I have to say that because that's my belief and that's my conscience. But if you're going to continue to fight the establishment, you're taking on one of the strongholds of the world's most vicious strongholds. Law enforcement officials, people who have what some people consider they wield the greatest power in our country, and you're getting right in the middle of their radar. And if you don't have a God Almighty standing beside you to give you the strength and the courage that you need, they're going to look for a way to discredit you, silence you, possibly kill you. You've already been through some of that. So I'm just saying, my encouragement to you as someone who's listening to this for the first time is, look for a relationship in Jesus Christ, because I believe that He could give you the strength that you'll need to go forward. But even if you decide not to, I don't want injustices to come upon anybody of any religious faith. We even have a couple of Muslims on our website that I believe have suffered huge injustices. So I'm not just advocating justice for Christians, obviously, but I want justice for everybody in America, regardless of their religious faith. But my counsel is, I believe that Jesus Christ and the Holy Bible is the answer to all of these problems. But I'll let you have the last word, Ron, and thank you for sharing your story today, and thank you for the courage that you showed.
Well, and I'm not going to dispute your faith. I would never challenge it. It's not one I share, obviously, but I'm definitely not going to dispute it or challenge it in any way, because I don't think it's my place. That being said, so long as we have a prison for profit system, so long as we have a government that pays people and people can profit off of the misery of others, we will always have this corrupt system, because people will pursue money at any cost. It is the greatest vice that exists out there, is the pursuit of money. And so long as we have people who are going to be corrupted by money, we are going to have a corrupt political system and a corrupt criminal justice system. The only way to remove that is to actually make it where people cannot profit and they cannot gain anything by prosecuting people, and you might see a huge reduction in innocent people being convicted, because then and only then can we actually have fairness. You take money, you take any vested interest that anybody else has in somebody else's pain and suffering, that can be removed. Then you only have zealots. You don't have people going out for money. But on the final note, and I say this consistently and persistently, if you ever want to hide a political prisoner, accuse them of molestation, accuse them of some heinous crime, because once you have them convicted, no one will listen to them. And this is what I'm trying to do, is get people to listen.
All right, very good.